Welcome to Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes, and we are back already with another talk video. Really wish CG would trickle this information out a little bit instead of me having 2 weeks without a talk video, and now I gotta do back-to-back videos in 2 different nights. Here are today's topics. We got the road ahead with the big title update, which is going to be a lot of quality of life improvements that I think we have all been expecting and is really going to help us out. The Jawa Scavenger update is part of that, the announcement of the Grand Inquisitor, and we will wrap up with a little bit more free-to-play gearing because I have this week's that I didn't include as part of yesterday's video. First portion of the road ahead is this video that they've been doing for a few of these now. In some of the previous ones, these were pretty important to watch. There would be information within them that was not in the body of the text. I didn't think that was the case this time, but I wasn't really paying too close of attention. The bulk of this update are the mechanics that are going to be affecting Grand Arena that are going to make our lives much easier and, for me, minimize some dumb mistakes. So what we are getting is this template where we can preset our teams both in 5v5 and 3v3 from the looks of it. And what this effectively gives us is a fleet preset without having fleet presets, at least on defense. We might still make mistakes on offense, but at least the defensive ones will be a little bit safer, and you won't see me things having the wrong capital ship with the wrong fleet anymore. And this is going to be important because what this gives us is something that more obsessive players can exploit. What you're going to see is more opponents use standard and stagnant defenses. This incentivizes players to not change things. There's going to be players who build out new squads and won't alter their defensive presets because it's an extra step, and people are going to take the path of least resistance. And if you look at your Grand Arena histories, look at your opponent's Grand Arena histories, and see that they're players who alter their strategy, it's going to allow you to leave a standard defense for opponents that you don't think you need to worry as much about, and then when you do come up against an opponent who changes their strategy, you're going to be able to make an adjustment, and they're going to see that it looks like you might be predictable when you're not. And one of the things that is going to allow us to do that is we can now remove squads, and that's a nice little update where it's going to set all the squads at once, and you can choose if you want to remove them, move them around, or shuffle them without having to set every single squad. That's subtle and nice. I like it. On top of that, we get some nice visual updates. One that I've been wanting, and the example they use I think is very notable and specific with Chirpa, because I've been very annoyed with my Ewoks where I've accidentally used Wicket as a leader because I'm so used to seeing Chirpa with that Zeta that I just click on Wicket, because Wicket I added later and Chirpa used to always be in a specific spot. When the Omicron was introduced, that made the Zeta disappear on Chirpa, and I just started making that mistake a couple times. Never in Grand Arena because I don't use Ewoks, but it's a thing that I'm glad to see changing. It's subtle, it's not really all that important, but it is nice. They have this portion here about the Razor Crest blueprints. I don't think this is too important, but I did want to pause here because there was no reason to really include it in the road ahead. I think they do it partly to just make it seem like it's longer, because this was already announced before. But what they did announce several road aheads or State of the Galaxies ago when Conquest characters were newer was the possibility of these Conquest releases to be added to the game in the Journey Guide. Now, they're not doing that with the Razor Crest, and I think it's partly because it's a ship and most players don't care about ships. But the way that they write this is they do indicate that things could be changing for other Conquest characters, and their final farm locations are in flux. And it might mean that the possibility of Conquest characters moving to the Journey Guide somehow may still be a possibility. The only thing that I find doubtful about that is that's extra content for characters that the majority of spenders already have. So to do that, maybe not. The Journey Guide was something that helps onboard newer players, so maybe that'll be the same logic of putting resources behind adding those characters to that location. This next portion here about the Jawa Scavenger update might be my favorite part of this road ahead, because this is something I was starting to get very concerned about. If you know how I play the game, I have been gearing up a huge portion of the characters to gear 11. It allows me to do testing, it allows me to make progress without really putting on gear that is too in demand, and it's allowed me to develop my roster extremely quickly. And what that looks like is I don't actually have all that many characters left to gear up. And one of the things I've been starting to be concerned about, because like my Ugnaught is past the point where I can craft those Mark 7 Ba armors, my Ugnaught has been instead Gamorrean Guard, because Gamorrean Guard lets me craft this piece, which crafts the same relic material as the Ugnaught does. But the Gamorrean Guard is currently part of the bonus calendar. And if you've been watching my quarterly speculation videos, you know for 2 of those quarterly speculation videos, basically, I've only done 2 of them. Since I've started doing that series, I've been talking about the Gamorrean Guard as a character that I think is very likely to get a rework, and soon, because of how it coincides with Mandalorian and with Book of Boba Fett. Book of Boba Fett content, I was saying, was not likely to happen until March or April, because CG doesn't get advance notice for everything, particularly the Filoni Favreau stuff. All of our Mando content has been happening a few months after the season. This calendar fits right in line with that timeline, and I think we're likely to see that Gamorrean Guard now, which means my concern of not being able to gear the Gamorrean Guard is no longer a major concern. But that was not the only character and only piece, because since I've developed so many characters in the game, there's also the problem that I'm running out of places to craft holo projectors. And I think that will be a problem for more and more players. So for us to now not have to worry about this and not have to keep characters around, that is such a nice big change. And I'm going to be starting to gear up a lot of these characters I've been holding back on because of this worry. Next up, we have Mace Windu. I didn't do a kit analysis for him. It didn't fit within my timeline, and I usually don't do them after the characters and reworks go live. If it's something you are interested in, that's something to let me know in the comments, and I'll consider it. These talk videos lately have been getting, not less views, they've been getting about the same amount of views. My Grand Arena videos are getting way more views than they have in the past. But Mace Windu, mod him for health, give him health primaries. He gets a lot of extra damage and benefit from having as much health as possible. That's how you're going to want to take care of him. And he's good. I like him so far and already, and I'm going to be doing a lot more thinking about how to utilize him in the game. I already used him in Grand Arena earlier today with those abilities that are not maxed out right now because of how they integrated him into this Grand Arena season. Now the next portion here, the Grand Inquisitor legendary unit. This wasn't really a surprise. This was something everybody was speculating and predicting. What is a surprise is, one, it's a legendary unit. That's I was not expecting. And the other surprise is the timing on this. I didn't think we were going to see him right now. I was speculating that it might be several more months before we saw before we saw the Grand Inquisitor, and I thought it might be a little bit before we saw additional Inquisitores units, but that looks to be not the case. I'm also a little disappointed about that, because for a player like me, I get advantages through anticipating where the game is going. A lot of people are a little hyper-focused on where they are in the moment and aren't preparing for the future. This is one of those things that I would have been preparing my Inquisitor units for and giving myself a little bit more of an advantage when these events go live. But I don't think I should be too surprised because I've also been predicting for several talk videos now that something was about to happen because CG has been far too generous. We've gotten 2 Galactic Chase events. We've gotten a bunch of those gear packs that we can get for crystals where we get either 25 or 50 of a valuable gear piece. Those are usually come at a time when CG wants us to be spending our crystals. On top of that, with all the marquees that we've been getting, and now with double drops, there's all of these things happening within the game to cause us to spend crystals. And what that does is it gets rid of our collective hoard so that CG can release a legendary character and make it that much harder for players like me and players who hoard crystals to be able to participate in the same way. Because I was in January, I had like 18k crystals, down from like 25k crystals that I normally would, not normally, but that I had been having for a lot lately. And then that is now dropped to 5,000 crystals. I am way below where I usually am. And I usually take marquee characters, at least as of the last several ones, I've been taking up to 4 stars using crystals and shipments. And that is something that's going to be difficult for me right now. I may continue to do it, but it's going to be a stretch for me instead of before it being just a default move. I wanted to highlight the wording here. They specifically say there are a few more Inquisitors coming to the game. CG tends to be very deliberate in these posts. Sometimes they can be sloppy, but their word choice is usually important. They say few, so that tells me we're going to be seeing at least more than 2. And this is a legendary event, and the way legendary events work is it's faction specific, so it's going to be any 5 characters of a faction, not a specific 5 characters like with journey events. And what we also should keep in mind is we may not know which 5 are going to be the best 5 for the event. So there might be a character we don't have yet that is going to be the key to unlocking the event, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's the last one, where it's like Dengar or Log Ray with the Chewbacca or C-3PO events, where those characters make beating the event far easier. There may be an Inquisitor that is going to be the linchpin in beating this event, and it may be prudent to be hoarding some gear and not putting it all on immediately, especially when you consider how many Kairos this faction needs. Already this faction is looking like Bad Batch 2.0 in terms of gear. So it might be something where save the gear, figure out which Inquisitors we need before putting that gear on. And last thing, I want to repeat this from yesterday's video. This came from a conversation on the Discord server. The Grand Inquisitor, there is a distinct possibility that the way he's going to function, the way that is going to make it possible for him to beat Galactic Legends, is he is going to make active all of the leaderships from all of the Inquisitors. So, because if you look at them right now, that's where the Zetas are, that's where the Omicrons are, and they're not really worth putting on right now, because no one is going to use those characters or this faction in that way. But if the Grand Inquisitor functions similarly to Hera, where Hera makes and shares all of the uniques for the Phoenix faction, if the Grand Inquisitor was able to absorb all of the leaderships from all of the Inquisitorious allies and make it part of his leadership, then that would make it where you need to level up all the leaderships, put all the Zetas on, put all the Omicrons on. And that just makes too much sense to me for why CG would have designed it right now, because the way they've designed it, there is no reason to be putting those resources on, and that's not something that CG would be doing. So that is something to be looking out for when this kit reveal happens. Now to wrap up, as we always do, with the free-to-play gearing of my roster. This is the gearing that I did just the other day before this current week of Grand Arena, so March 15th or whatever that was. JMK, took him to Gear 12. Gear 11 is not enough for that event, just was experimenting. Gear 12 you can make a little bit of progress. I'm testing out the rest of that throughout the rest of the event. Mara Jade took up to 6 stars, well on my way to Star Killer. Hopefully I get some good drops with the rest of this double drop event. Done with the Darth Talon farm. And then Fennec, I'm bringing up to Gear 12. Gear 11 is definitely not enough. I eventually want to take her to Relic, so that's just part of that incremental progress. I didn't do much else, but I did take Wampa and increase his Relic. So Wampa going from Relic 3, bringing him up to Relic 5. Relic 3, you can do a little work, it's not great. Relic 5, though, is a little bit more effective. Not enough for GLs, but at least for General Grievous. I'll be just taking him incrementally as my resources allow. And that will wrap up this video. And with all these Inquisitors being added to the game, and with the Inquisitors appearing in the Kenobi trailer, I think Disney has finally got me to be willing to watch Star Wars Rebels. So that's going to be one of my little entertainment side projects during the next several weeks as we lead up into the release of Kenobi. Thank you for watching. This is Still Plays Galaxy of Heroes. Be safe out there, everyone, and be excellent to each other.